Exchange zone obviously differs, but it's only 4x1 and 4x4.
Yeah.
Okay, so your 4x4, the exchange zones is a lot different, but we'll talk about that at the end. For now though, with exchanges, we'll be utilizing what we call a visual handoff, okay, for the most part, meaning that when I go to receive the baton, I will make visual contact to receive it, okay? If you get to the point where you have athletes that can perform a blind exchange without looking, that's great. But for the most part, it's going to be a visual exchange. The most important, I guess, the most frequent question I always get is, where do I play? Where do I place my really, what coaches determine to be their best athlete in the relay? I'll talk to you today about something that if you utilize the strategy, and like last time we did it, Justin said, oh, we went to the next and everyone was lined up in the same spot. But I'll try to get you to a point where the order won't matter. It's about placement in the exchange zone that matters, okay? So for the 4x1, we'll work red. So I'm in lane 3 here. So we'll work red. Arrow pointing this way means this is the beginning of the exchange zone. Red arrow all the way up there in the 3rd lane is the end of the exchange zone, okay? That means there's a huge amount of the 4x1 that is exchange zone. The good thing about that is, if you have a runner that you determine to be your fastest and you're wondering where to place them, the worst place you would want to place them in comparison to what you would determine to be quote unquote your slowest runner would be at the same spot in the exchange zone. But every event I've been to, everybody lines up right here at the front of the exchange zone. What this means is that your fastest runner is now running the same distance as your quote-unquote slowest runner, okay? If you move your one of your slower runners to way up here in the exchange zone, guess what we just did? We made our fastest runner run 115 meters and our slowest runner run 85, okay? So I emphasize that because the order matters. Trust me, usually most teams will put their quickest person at the end, but it maybe doesn't need to matter if you place your athletes at a certain part in the exchange zone. And I know me and Justin have talked about it before, there's volunteers working the exchange zone, so when your athletes get up to the track, most of the volunteers will say, here's the spot, here's the exchange zone. But if you can practice this enough and tell that one runner to line up in the middle of the exchange zone, your faster runner will run 115 meters instead of only running 90, okay? As far as the actual handoff goes, you can actually start athletes beyond, they're in front of the exchange zone, because there's what's called an acceleration zone, okay? So all the way back to this little itty bitty red triangle back here, I can't receive the baton in this area, but I can start back here and then work my way up. So what does that mean? I guess the most important thing about exchanges is that I think it's best for your athletes to start moving before they receive the baton. One, it eliminates, it's going to make your time better, but then 2, it's going to eliminate the possibility for a collision or your athlete running up on the other one and then having to veer out of the lane. And if I started in lane 3 and end up here, this is a DQ, okay? Justin, you want to just walk through this with me real quick? And you can actually, either one would be, I'll take the exchange and then you can. So in the midst of everything, we didn't bring a baton. So blame the sports director. I'm just kidding. So what I always tell athletes to do is you can make a mark. You just look at a spot where when Justin's going to hit that spot, that's why I will start moving, all right? Most of your athletes, if they're right-handed, are going to feel more comfortable. We're making a visual exchange in their right hand. Some athletes will feel, if they're left-handed, will make it feel more comfortable with their left hand. But that doesn't necessarily matter because I'm going to set a spot. It's on the average, I would say, is 4 to 6 steps away from me. So if I start at the very front of the exchange zone and I looked off 4 to 6 steps, let's just say that it was at this corner. I would tell myself, right, when Justin gets to that corner, that doesn't mean I start sprinting out right away, but that I can start moving to receive the baton. How you want your athletes to coach them up to receive it if we're doing a visual exchange, it's important to have palm up, okay? And there should be a V, this little V, or I guess it's more of a backwards L. But that baton should be placed right in that little slot, okay? If your athlete's doing this, which I see sometimes, they'll take it like this. You're going to end up hitting the forearm of the athlete, and you're going to end up botching the exchange, okay? And also what happens when I see people do this is they end up getting run up on more because my arm's not as far out. Your athlete's not going to do this. So if I'm doing it right, I can separate myself a little bit when I'm moving, the length of my arm at least. So we're not exchanging it right here on my hip. Does that make sense? Okay? So Justin, we're just going to slap hands for the time being. But when he gets that mark, I'll turn, keep looking at him, and it'll smoothen out the exchange. Okay? Justin, go ahead, buddy. So he gets to that point, I'll start moving, take the exchange, and now I can go. Okay? So you can tell, one, it'll eliminate collisions in the exchange zone, and two, he didn't have to veer off because he felt like he was going to run into me. All right? What I was talking about earlier, if Justin was one of the slower runners in the event,
which I am,
which not anymore, he's gotten a little quicker over the years, I would be the one that, if I was the quicker runner, I want to get it as close as possible to this front of the exchange zone because I want to run the furthest. Okay? That means that your athlete, I can start here. Okay? I just got to make sure that when I receive the baton, I'm in the exchange zone. If it was just the opposite, and I was the slowest runner, and Justin was the fastest, like I said, he would run further. Look how much further he would have to run than when we made the exchange zone earlier. I just added 15 meters to his run because I'm going to take it way up here. So don't forget that strategy. I don't know how that works. I think most of the time it's volunteers running the exchange zone. Coaches, are you allowed to get out there at all?
No, it's not.
Okay.
So that's what I was going to ask. If you want your athlete up there,
yep,
and the volunteer keeps saying, nope, you got to come to here.
Yeah. That's one.
What can you do?
You can write on their hand.
Right on their hand?
Yeah. Say he wants to be moved up in the exchange zone, or put him at the middle of the exchange zone.
I mean, you can't complain about volunteers because it wouldn't be special.
No, exactly.
But they all don't know the
nature
rules.
of the beast. Exactly. And every one of our volunteers, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
They're going to set them right here, and a lot of them, they're going to leave them there. I don't think you'll have too much of a problem if your athlete walks up to there, but I mean, it's different everywhere. It's hard to say, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's why we do try to get, track people when they're volunteering. That way they kind of have a clue when they're out here.
Right.
But that's why it might help just to have something maybe on their name tag or something. I don't know, just something where they could go, here, look.
And like you said, I mean, even if the athlete had a general idea, it doesn't mean that they have to line up right at a certain spot in the middle of the exchange zone. But you would know that, hey, I'm making my quicker athlete, run the further, the longer distance. Okay. For the 4x4, it's a little bit different because the exchange zone's just it's a flat exchange zone. So every runner will start back here. And the exchange zones, because 4x4, the first runner has to go the whole lap in their lane. The second runner will run this curve in their lane. And then usually there's a cone that's set up at the same mark on this other side of the track. And at that point, they can start waterfalling in. So your third and fourth exchanges in the 4x4, depending on how close the race is, can get a little messy because basically we just line up in here and we stack in order. So if my team's in first, I'll be standing on the inside. If Justin's team was in second, he'd be standing right next to me, and so on. So it can get a little more congested here, especially with the third and fourth exchange zone and the 4x4, but use the same technique. You're still going to get moving a little bit, turn and make the exchange. Only difference between the 4x1 and 4x4 is the 400, they just ran a full lap. So sometimes when they get here, they're not moving as quick as they were in the 4x1, for some other athletes. So make sure you're telling your athletes not to start sprinting out right away in the 4x4 because he's going to end up running away from that runner that's giving him the baton. Okay?
And I know even though we're talking about moving forward, even a shuffle
Yep.
is better than the stationary grab it and go.
Right.
So I mean, just understand that any movement forward is better than stationary.
Yep. Any questions about the
Yeah, I
exchange?
got a tip that I learned the hard way. When you guys are filling out the paperwork for athletes in a relay, and you're filling out, okay, I want my relay to be John, Marissa, Katrina, and Daniel. If you list them that way on the paper, that's the way they're going to take them out on the track.
Yeah.
You can go running out there and say, no, I wanted him to start first. And we got them on the paper this way. So list them on the entry sheet exactly in the order that you want them to run, because that's how they're going to take them out there. They're not going to take them out and say, well, which leg are you supposed to run and which leg are you supposed to run?
Right.
If it says John starts.
Yeah, that's the way they do.
So make sure that you list them on your entry sheets in the order that you want them to run.
One other good thing I wanted to talk about was how to hold the baton. A lot of people. So if you
Just like you don't want to, me grabbing and squeezing the baton really hard is actually taking a lot more energy than you think. So even me holding it like this right now and I'm clenching and trying to press really hard, I'm using a lot of energy that is just does not needed for me to run the 100 or 400, whatever it may be. The way that we teach it, it depends on how comfortable your athletes are. We hold it like this, with this making an O. Now that might be a little bit too technical, but we just feel like it should be light in your hand. So emphasize that. The best coaching point should be light in your hand. So if you do want to hold it like this, that's fine. But I feel like the more I hold it with all, my whole hand, the more chance when I start running, and maybe I start struggling a little bit when I'm running, I'm getting a little bit tired, you tend to clench up when you're getting tired. So if I'm doing that with a baton, I'm just going to be wasting a lot more energy. So if your athletes are able to, we do a middle finger and a thumb as far as once I get it and then I get placed. That's just so when we start clenching up and we're getting tired, I'm not blowing a whole bunch of energy trying to really clench onto the baton. Okay?
When you're exchanging it and he's coming up to give it to you, how far does he keep going before he can go off the track?
Usually what will happen, the safest thing that I always, no matter what level, we wait for this, because there'll be a person over here that with a flag that will, if there's a DQ, they'll put the flag up. What we usually do is that if I made the exchange and I'm here, I'll start walking back. I mean, I can walk backwards or I can stand still, but we'll usually wait for someone to give me verbal to get off the track.
Because you don't want to walk across
Exactly.
if somebody else.
Yeah, now you'll get DQ'd that way. So the most important thing is tell your athletes to stay in the lane, and we won't. It's probably best you tell them don't leave the track until someone tells you to leave the track. Stay in your lane until someone tells you different. That way, even if something happens where they're way out in front and they start, they feel like they can leave, but then there's that maybe one team that's in a little bit further behind and they end up walking across. Even if I don't hit them and there's a runner coming, they could, DQ you. So I tell them to stay in there as long as until someone tells you to get out of your lane.
Practice it that way too. Once
Yep.
you finish, have them stay there in their lane, even if they're the only ones on the
Yep.
track, and then wait for someone to tell them or get them.
Yep. I think that's probably the easiest. That way there's no, risk for any DQ at the end of it. Any other questions? That was a good one.